Good morning. I hope you had a terrific evening last night. The National Aquarium is one of Baltimore's treasures, and we're so glad we've been able to share that with you. This morning, we want to take our discussion beyond innovation to look at how the themes of creativity, discovery, and engagement have played out here in Baltimore through the good work of corporations and corporate citizens. We're thrilled to be joined by two individuals who've been a big part of the Baltimore Renaissance. First is Damian Costa. Damian is managing partner of Sagamore Ventures, the venture investment firm of Plank Industries, a privately held company with diversified holdings in commercial real estate, hospitality, food and beverage, and thoroughbred horse racing, all under the Sagamore group of brands. The company is based in Baltimore and serves as the family investment arm of Kevin Plank, founder, chairman, and CEO of Under Armour. Damian is a military veteran, having served 12 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL. Following his military career, Damian co-founded FX Studios, focused on building virtual and on-premise employee wellness programs globally. He's currently focused on venture, private equity, entrepreneurship, and innovation growth here in Baltimore and beyond. Damian holds an undergraduate degree in finance and an MBA from the University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business. Please join me in welcoming Damian Costa. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Adam Peak. Adam is an accomplished sales and marketing executive with more than 20 years of experience in the sports and sporting goods industries. Adam most recently served as Executive Vice President of Sport Category Management at Under Armour until June of 2016. In this role, Peak took responsibility for driving synergy across product sales and marketing to help position and elevate Under Armour brand around the world. Prior to that, he held several leadership positions at the company, from Vice President of Footwear to Senior Vice President of Sales to Executive Vice President of Global Marketing. Currently working as a consultant, Adam also serves as an adjunct instructor on the faculty of Loyola University of Maryland. He earned a bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Maryland and later an MBA from Wake Forest University. Adam lives in Baltimore with his wife, Wendy, and their three children, Ben, Sam, and Charlotte. Please join me in welcoming Adam Peak. So the format for this morning is a little bit of a guided discussion. Our hope is that through hearing from Damian and Adam, you get a sense of how these themes of creativity, discovery, and engagement have played a role in their lives, but also have played a part in the transformation of Baltimore. So I guess, fellas, the first question is, as you think about your experiences, what shaped your paths?
I'll go. First of all, good morning. For those of you that aren't from Baltimore, the weather's like this all the time. I was actually out of town traveling, and I came back yesterday and landed, and I was just like, where are we? Beautiful weather. So for those of you not from this area, I hope you're enjoying it. Path. You know, I don't know if you pick your path. Sometimes I think you're kind of put on the path that you ultimately end up on in life, and definitely in your career. I will tell you, foundational for me is probably my family. Growing up, I'm the youngest of four, and I'm much younger than my older brothers and sisters. From a span of like 5 or 6 years to all the way to 13 years. I have a sister that's 13 years older than me. So I was so much younger when we were all growing up, and specifically when they were going through their milestones in life, those life experiences, whether they made the sports team they wanted to make, whether they got into the college they wanted to get into. Their first jobs out of college. My parents were crazy enough, so my brother at the time is 21 and I'm 10, and my mom was crazy enough to allow my brother to take me cross country with my brother, just the two of us, in a Rabbit diesel, to take him out to his first job in California. So we drove cross country together, a 21-year-old and a 10-year-old. So I had some life experiences where I was able to kind of sit back in the passenger seat, so to speak, and take it all in. And I think those experiences helped set my own expectations for maybe what I wanted to do in life, and probably more importantly, maybe what I didn't want to do in life. And that ultimately, I think, put me on the path to where I ended up.
No, that's really great. Well, what an act to follow. I tell you, I've known Adam about 10, 11 years. And I knew that one day, if I played my cards right, I'd wind up on stage with him. This is so fantastic. So paths, that's an interesting question for me, I think, because my struggle throughout my entire adult life has been walking down a path and trying to make sure that it was connected at each juncture as I made each different turn. Out of high school, I grew up in a bit of a different family, but I had both my parents were around. Father was a military guy, but we didn't move a ton, which was actually really, really interesting and neat. And I grew up in Southern Maryland, not too far from here in Baltimore. I had one brother who was 22 months exactly younger than me, and that was it. And we were thick as thieves growing up. And so, as I'm finishing high school, I was one of those kids that, this is pre-Ritalin days, so I was a little bit ADD, as they say, and I had a little bit of trouble focusing. Was in a bit of trouble, in other areas. And so the military seemed like a sensible path for me at the time. I had, tried the college path, and I'd failed miserably at that. And I had this awakening moment where I realized that as I watched some of the people around me that I grew up with, make these decisions that were going to affect them for the rest of their lives, and they were going to wind up either stuck in some dead-end job or, stuck in this town they didn't want to be, or stuck in a situation that wasn't exactly what they had wanted. I made this conscious decision to sort of pull myself together for that moment and go into the military, which ultimately changed my life. And so 12 years of doing that, I had served pre and post 9/11, which was interesting, to say the least. I had the distinct pleasure of spending a lot of time in Europe and Africa, having lots and lots of fun. We did some serious things, even back in the 90s in the Balkans and that sort of stuff. But then post 9/11, the whole world changed, and it was very clear that the path going forward for me in the military was very clear what we were going to be doing for the foreseeable future. And so at 12 years, I decided to get out, and rather than take the sort of the normal leap over into government service, one of the 3-letter agencies or something like that, I chose to completely depart from that and start a company with my brother. And did that. I had some success, and along the way, I met Kevin Plank, I met Adam, and then when I left that to try to jump to this field that I'm in today, I realized that education was going to be the only conduit that bridged those two worlds together. Finished my undergrad and my graduate degree. And so, if you try to follow this little, bumpy road that I've walked in my life, it can seem like at different times I made some hard lefts and some hard rights to wind up where I am today. But I think that's probably true for everybody, right? So
since education was so important to both of you, were there mentors and role models who helped you both along your journey?
So talked a little bit about my family. Education was always, from when I was little, there was no option for me, from my parents to my brothers and sisters. Like, we did well in school, or at least we tried to, and we were going to college. There was really no other option. I think the beauty of looking back on it was, Damian and I were talking about this earlier. My dad always taught me, you're going to go to school not just to get a job, and I think all too often today it's all about just getting a job. You're going to go to school because you want to kind of grow and expand your mind, and that was something that was instilled in me in a really, really young age. And I've always been fortunate to have family, have coaches, have teachers, whether teachers at the primary level or even professors, kind of for whatever reason push me. And the ones that I remember and the ones that I consider my mentors to give me great counsel and guidance were the ones that made me uncomfortable. The ones that put me in a situation where I absolutely had to stretch to succeed. Whether it was a project, whether it was a job, whether it was maybe a promotion, step-up opportunities where, for whatever reason, they had confidence in me that I could do it. And they were purposeful. It wasn't reckless. They were purposeful. And the value of that, the value of putting people in situations where they can succeed, but they absolutely have to commit. As a teacher as well, I find that really, really valuable. Putting people in situations where, you know what, you still have a little bit control because you're your teacher, you're in a classroom, particularly for this room, you're in a classroom, you can control the environment, but push them to be curious, push them to be uncomfortable. As I look back, the consistent theme of mentors and people that guided me, the thing that comes up, the biggest theme for me is it didn't feel like work. It felt very, really natural to learn, to be around them, to do things. Didn't feel like work at all. I've tried to take that now as I manage people, as I try to grow and develop people as well. I'm really, really conscious of how I interact with them, what my attitude is, my disposition. Hopefully, you can take something from that. I can tell you that's definitely what I took from it, from the people that I learned from.
No, that's great. Some similarities there for sure. You hear family, you hear coaches, you hear the people that have impacted you in your either your life or your business world. For me, I have a few people that, as I think back, they gave me a bit of guidance, a bit of help, and that sort of stuff. But more importantly, they're the people that if I were to underperform or not make a great decision, or if I was going to be sort of drop behind in any way, there were people that I felt like I would disappoint, And so I had a father. He was around, but he very much worked 9 to 5, head down, and it was someone that I respected and admired a great deal. But it wasn't the kind of life that I wanted. Same job, same house, same place. I was more mobile. I was more antsy. I wanted to get around. And then I had this grandfather, my mom's dad, who was Naval Academy guy, World War II veteran, this hero, worked for Admiral Rickover on submarines, just hulk of a guy, captain of the football team, great looking. I got all my looks from him. And he was this amazing, amazing human being, and I spent so much time with him. And he had this way about him where, he didn't have to grab me and shove, lessons down my throat. He just was. Right? And then in my being around him, I wanted to be like that. And so I've had other folks that have come through my life, whether it's bosses or leaders in the military, that I respect, and for a lot of those ways, I didn't want to let them down. But that taking those types of lessons, where now today, if I have a company I'm working with and they're not doing what I want them to do, or I need them to change a bit, or I want them to act a certain way. The lead by example, it sounds so cliche, but it's the most important thing, I think, in the world. It's you set a good example yourself, and then the rest will follow. I'm trying to keep it at a high level, but that's sort of the lesson I took away.
That's great. So one of our speakers yesterday afternoon spoke about the opportunity that we should take to be more attentive to the world around us. So if an essential quality in personal growth is being open to seeing the world with fresh and open eyes, to possess a spirit of discovery, how did that spirit influence you and the experiences that you've had?
Take it away.
So discovery, look, I learned at a young age, and very true today, probably more true today than ever. There's always someone smarter than you. There's always going to be someone better than you. Hard work trumps talent, I believe, more often than not. So always be open to kind of learning from other people. As my career started to kind of grow, one of the toughest transitions for me was not having all the answers and asking for help and being comfortable with that over time. Surround yourself with really good people. Whether you're in a classroom or in a boardroom, surround yourself with good people that you can depend on and be accountable to. 2 life lessons, like what I call operating principles that I try to live up to. One is my own, and one was drilled into me over the last 15 years. First one is something I call swim lanes. I always look at my job or the position I'm in or whatever I'm doing at the time as that's my swim lane. And if you think of things in terms of swim lanes, I'll use an analogy from a company. Company's got a lot of different functions, right? You got sales and marketing and finance and accounting and distribution and logistics and IT. Each one of those things is a lane. Everybody has the responsibility for their lane. The edges of those lanes, though, they're not like these rigid walls anymore. The edges of those lanes are like swim lanes. They're fluid. You may drift over into someone else's lane from time to time. You might be pulled over, actually, because they need some help or they need some support. The other thing, it works the other way, too. People are going to drift into your lane. People drift into your lane when they feel they can help you, when they feel that, you know what, maybe they can do it a little bit better. The end result is ultimately what matters. So think of things in terms of swim lanes, not these rigid walls, in terms of your role and responsibility. I think that serves you well. Second, operating principle, again, this was drilled into me from Kevin Plank over 15 years, and I love it, and it's a philosophy that I try to still have today. And it's as simple as saying starting with yes. You start with yes. We're all way too busy, overscheduled, overprogrammed today. There's not enough time, right? So when people come to you, and whether they just ask for help, whether they come to someone like Damian with a business opportunity or a proposal, our knee-jerk reaction, I think more often than not, is to say no. Not even hear them out. Just say no, I don't have time. Try to flip that around. Start with yes. The fact of the matter is, Under Armour here in Baltimore never would have happened if a little tailor in the garment district in New York City said no. When Kevin Plank had his idea for Under Armour, a tight, white, stretchy t-shirt that, quite frankly, not only no one was wearing, no one even knew they needed, when he went up to a tailor and said, "Can you make this for me?" Instead of that tailor just saying, no, I don't have time, that's a crazy idea, he actually said yes. So start with yes. It is a philosophy. It's really tough. I try to remind myself of that on a daily, weekly basis, and I think the more often that I try to live that, the more things I think develop and good things happen.
No, that's great. I was going to probably mention the start with the yes thing as well. But, for me, there is this moment in my life, I look at my life in different chapters, where things were placed in front of you. You had an objective, a goal. You took that goal down, you had another one, right? Life was in chunks, very understandable, very distinct chunks, and if you just put one foot in front of the other, were good enough, performed well enough, then you would continue down the path and you would excel and you would succeed and life would be great. And I jumped from that to managing 18-year-old hairstylists. So imagine for a second, and gym trainers and other employees that, shocking to me at the time, they could quit. It was nuts, right? I was surrounded by not just military, not just special forces, but finished my career at Development Group. You can Google it. So there's about 90 guys at the time that were doing that. And they were the best of the best of the best of the best of the SEAL teams, right? And so to leave that and then go into the private sector in such an abrupt way required a great deal of discovery for me, a great deal of reevaluation. And now, I moved into a life where every single day I have to constantly reevaluate, am I on the right track? Are things moving toward the right goal? Am I doing things the right way? The only person that's going to ultimately grade that is me. The only person that's going to change that is me. I'm going to get some corrective action from Adam's former boss and my current boss, which usually comes fairly aggressively. But I'm going to get a little laugh out of him now. Yeah, I was like, I'm good. But these little bits of discovery for me are what keep me going right now. It's that every single day, am I on the right track? How do I get back on the right track? Reanalysis, reassessment, and then deploying those things to make sure that we're all pointing toward the same goal, and then making sure that North Star, that true north, that goal that you're achieving is all, the line is being towed by the different groups, the divisions that Adam laid out, those various swim lanes, making sure it's all pointing in the right direction. But these types of things, these changes in your life are going to require different points of discovery along the way.
So one of the things that strikes me is that each of you is very reflective about the experiences that you've had. You talk about pausing and assessing and reevaluating and then making some different changes. So as you both consider your experiences from one point to another, what did you discover about the notion of just changing your worldview and being adaptable?
So I say a lot, the world doesn't hand you a lesson plan. I've never said that in front of 600 educators before, so it probably takes on really, really different meaning than when I normally say it. But the world does not hand you a lesson plan. My experience, when you're an entrepreneur, when you work for a startup company, there is no employee handbook. On your first day on the job, no one hands you a book that says this is what you do Monday through Friday for your job. It doesn't exist. You have to rely on not only your experience, the team around you, to make it happen. And again, it goes back to something we talked a little bit a few minutes ago, being uncomfortable. If there's one thing that I think, whether it's this generation, the next generation, or boys all over the world, definitely in this country, I think getting them at least, whether it's aware or comfortable being uncomfortable, that is a life lesson, because the world does not hand you a lesson plan. And you know what? As you go through life, as you hit these milestones, things aren't linear either. Think about your career. If you start here, let's say you're a salesperson and you want to become a vice president. You know, the path to that is you start out as a salesperson, and then you become a district manager, and then a regional manager, and then maybe you'll be the VP of sales. That trajectory, that linear path, very rare, doesn't happen. It usually is you start here, you go up here, you may fall down here, you end here, and hopefully you get to where you want to go, but it's not a straight line. Things are very unpredictable, no lesson plans. You got to require people to be open to continuing to learning, reacting and adapting and responding to the things around them, and embrace that. If you see that in individuals, I would, maybe it's the wrong word to use, but I would attack that. I would absolutely exploit that, because that is a character I think that can be developed, but it is very, very, very important, I think, today to continuing to move forward.
No, that's great. You know, for me, the question of how has these different life lessons, how has the world around me impacted decisions I made? Yeah, it's I've gone again. I keep going back to these various sections of my life that have dictated how I view the world, how I perceive those around me. And I can tell you, this well-adjusted, somewhat well-dressed guy on the stage today looks and talks and acts absolutely nothing like I did 12 years ago when I left the military, right? 5 years ago. Yeah. So, last year, as a matter of fact. What it took to do the job I did before, the mental state that I had to be in, the view that I had of different types of people throughout the world, it's challenging, right? And then to leave that and then enter into a new chapter in your life that requires such an extreme shift. And I got to be honest, everybody in the room, I've never actually talked about my military background. Adam's known me 12 years. I might have told him one or two stories, and that was over a considerable amount of alcohol at one night. And so I do it today because when I sat with Chris before, when we were prepping a few months back, and I listened to the themes of this conference, and it was about just these very strong life lessons. I didn't know how to get up here and talk about what I do today without really going back and referencing what I did 12 years ago and then 12 years before that. And so that mental shift that had to take place for me, to leave one sector and then move into another, and then embrace various different types of people, be more open-minded. It's actually caused me to be one of the more open-minded people that you'll probably meet. I would put myself up there. I think I've learned to embrace different groups and faiths and things that I once had to create a deep hatred for. And it's been great, right? And this open-mindedness has allowed me to perform and to excel and to exceed. And when Adam talks about a lesson plan, it's because he's a professor now. But he would probably have called it a playbook maybe a few years ago. And I think about not having a playbook every single day. My boss comes to me and he says, Damian, I need you to go out and find me X, Y, and Z because I need you to go create jobs at Baltimore, opportunity in Baltimore. I need you to do these great things because that's the right thing to do. That's what we have to do with all this stuff that we're investing in. It has to bring value to Under Armour, value to Baltimore, value to Maryland, create jobs and opportunity. And I'm gonna let you know a little secret. There's no playbook that says, here's how you build a 140,000 square foot facility for companies to come here and attract them and keep them here and invest in them and teach them and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's not out there, We do everything first, different, not the usual, not the normal. We break molds all the time. And the ability to constantly do that is because I had my entire world completely rocked, shattered, blown apart, and put back together. And the guy that came back from that is one of the more open-minded guys in the world. I can rethink things. I can be open to criticism for the most part. I can be open to lots of stuff. And I attribute that to the first 12 years of my professional career.
Thank you. So obviously there's some relationship between creativity and entrepreneurship, right? So how do you see that playing out in the experiences that you've had?
Look, creativity. We all are creative, right? We have a lot of ideas. We have some good ideas, some not so good ideas, and probably some really bad ideas. But we all have ideas. We can all be creative. What are you passionate about? Think about that, and how do you apply yourself to come up with an idea or to make it better? That's creativity. Entrepreneurship is like putting it into action. Taking that creativity and putting it into motion. How are you going to do something different, better, faster, stronger than maybe it's being done today? So that balance, again, I believe we all have the ability and we all are creative at times. The counterbalance to that is, the entrepreneurial aspect of that is putting it into action, putting it into motion. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, those are two very interesting words, right? I don't know if you can be one without the other. For me, the entrepreneur that I look for, and I'll tell you, my first year in the job, because of where I was and because I was basically filling this role of, hey man, I'm getting a lot of cell phone calls and emails and stuff, so I got to go focus on my company. I'm gonna need you to go ahead and handle all that stuff. And so I think I looked at 732 different deals in my first year 4 years ago, and maybe that's more or less than other groups around. But what it taught me was how do I very quickly screen through, see what's important, see what I'm going to pass on. Because Kevin believes that every single person gets a response. He believes, and to this day, he still makes sure that every crazy email, whether a bake sale down to an M&A talk, everyone gets an email back. And so I started off on that same path and did the same thing. And, as you start sorting through, you quickly realize what are the big things that entrepreneur, what are the things that make them stand out, right? And for me, it was, are you a solution searching for a problem, or are you solving a real problem, right? Have you gone through life and you hit something that just eats you, you can't sleep, it's so broken that unless you fix it, unless you pour everything you have into it, unless you creatively find a way to make this work, you won't be able to sleep. That, for me, that's the entrepreneurial spirit that I'm looking for. Unfortunately, I have a boss that, bleeds that out every single day, right? He's a guy, 22 years old, 2-a-day, 3-a-day football practices in August. Most of us heard the story. His shorts made out of one material, his cotton t-shirts made out of a different material, and he said to himself, why can't the shirt be made out of this stuff? I'm not changing my shorts, I'm changing my shirt 3 times a day, and by the way, it's really heavy. Sounds so simple right now, but a multi-billion-dollar company was built from that. And that's the example of someone who's saying, I have got to fix this problem. And great entrepreneurs throughout history, that's the attitude they've had. The ones we emulate, that's the attitudes they have. The ones that struggle are the ones that they want to be an entrepreneur. I just don't want to work for somebody else. I'm sure I'll find something to do. I want to sleep on a couch and eat ramen noodles and be broke. And, I love that sort of lifestyle. And they just keep bouncing from idea to idea, lots of Me Too things. And for those folks, I'm trying to point them at a direction and go, look, man, find a real problem and solve it. But the two, creativity and entrepreneurship are very, very much interlinked. You can't really be one without the other. You got to have a little bit of both.
So one of the great things about Under Armour and so many others here in Baltimore is that I think corporations and corporate citizens have seen real problems here and try to solve them. Can you describe what you've seen happen here in Baltimore? Why here and why now?
It's been actually pretty interesting. I think with Baltimore, what we're starting to get is just, the credit of the natural assets and benefits that we already have here. Geography, the academic institutions, the labor force that wants to move here, the cost of living. Like these things are all, the weather. These things are all starting to coalesce and come together, and we're starting to get that critical mass where more people are focusing on the good than the bad. Baltimore's biggest image is that I know we got 100 and some different groups out here. We got 20 countries represented. I'll bet you that if I ask people that aren't from anywhere around here, whatever country you're from, if I say Baltimore, I bet the first thing that pops in your head is The Wire, right? The Wire. So, and the image that Baltimore has, that national image, is so tainted from decades of, to be fair, somewhat accurate representation, but it's not the complete picture. It is a picture, right? And so for me, it's changing that national, that global narrative about this city that I love more than anything in the world, right? And we do that through telling a great story, celebrating our successes, celebrating our wins, investing to get companies to come here or stay here, right? And probably most importantly, investing in training the labor force for tomorrow. My whole focus right now has not shifted, but it is pointing toward figuring out the platform that's going to help bridge this labor and this skills gap that we're seeing not just in Baltimore, but every single city like Baltimore, right? These post-industrial revolution cities that have been somewhat left behind by this Detroit, this rapid explosion that's happened over the last few years. I mean, this is a real problem, and it's only going to get worse. Automation is not on the way. It's here, and it's going to get more prevalent throughout different corporations. We're going to lose those lower skilled jobs. We have to bring that group of society up with us. They have to start getting some of the soft skills, not just the trade skills. And so, we're heavily focused on that. But Baltimore, there is some interesting stuff happening. I ask all of you, look, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's Detroit, whether it's Cincinnati, Cleveland, whatever, don't take your eye off the ball there. There are some interesting things happening, interesting stuff, and these are the cities where you're going to see a lot of change. We all know the story of San Francisco and New York and Chicago. That book's written, right? But the books for a lot of these other smaller cities still being written today, and they're changing rapidly.
So, based on what you know and what you've experienced, what can we as educators do to prepare our students to live lives of creativity, discovery, and engagement?
So creativity, to try to wrap it all together here. Talked a lot about time, right? One thing you can't buy is more time. And we are all too busy. We're all on our phones way too much, overscheduled, overprogrammed. By the way, that doesn't just apply to us. It applies to, and for this room in particular, all the boys that you mentor and educate around the world. They're always running to something, right? Running to class, running to practice, running to a club. They're overscheduled. There's a lot of positivity, I think, that can come out of that intensity and that really, really digging into something. There's the flip side of that, though, that I think we all have to be mindful of is it limits the opportunity to be curious sometimes. It limits the opportunity for them to be uncomfortable. I can tell you, I have 3 kids, but I have 2 boys who are boys Latin. And they're always just racing to finish their homework, racing to finish the project, racing to get off the phone. If you're always racing to finish, I think you lose sight of like the most valuable part, which is like the process and the journey to get there. So I taught last semester around the corner at Loyola University, and one of on the first day of class, what I announced was that there's not going to be any final exam. And these were first-year MBA students. And they were thrilled. They thought, this is going to be fantastic. I signed up for the right class, the right instructor, no final, I don't have to cram, I don't have to stress about it. But what I didn't tell them was there was going to be, instead of the final exam, there was going to be a semester-long project where they had to build their own marketing plan. And the marketing plans are relevant for this story. It's all about the process and the journey to actually get to where you want to go. Try to embrace that and get people comfortable with get them like focused on now. what is happening now? Not so much what the end product is going to be and just racing to finish. Like, what are we doing right now? Because I can tell you that process, and in my experience, at least, real live example from just last semester, we would have these checkpoints along the way, again, to kind of emphasize the journey. And yes, we talked about the marketing plan and how do we make things better, and what, I gave them my advice and my point of view on that. But the discussions that we had were about team dynamics. And man, I can't get my teammate or my partner to actually do this, and it's his responsibility. Those are valuable life lessons. And it's really made me stop and think that, we are overprogrammed, we are overscheduled, and I'm sure you see it in your classrooms around the world, and I think the kids feel that, the boys feel that. How do we get them focused, like right here, right now, in class right now? How are you designing, in my world, in Damian's world, there are no lesson plans, I wish there were. How do you design your lesson plans to get them, like, attention right now? Right now is what's important, not that the papers due next week. Right now is what's most important. So giving them that opportunity to be curious, to embrace that, I think, however you do it, however you find a way to kind of break through that, I think it has the potential to be really, really powerful.
So what I appreciate this morning is that you both began with this notion of saying yes at the outset when we made this request of you, and know how much I appreciate your thoughtful remarks, particularly linking creativity and entrepreneurship, putting creativity in action, because I think that's what we try to inspire with our boys every day. So folks, won't you join me in thanking Damian and Adam for their work this morning. A small token of appreciation.
Thank you. This better be a tie. What? All right, man. Chris?
Thank you guys really much. Hopefully it was helpful sharing at least our experiences, and how you can apply them obviously is up to you. But hopefully there is some application that maybe you find valuable from your few days here in Baltimore. So thanks very much.
Thanks a ton. Enjoy your time.
So Damian and Adam will stick around for a little bit for questions after we break on our way to our first workshop. So thanks again, guys. Thank you. So just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we get on our way. The next workshop block begins at 10:15 up in the upper school, followed by a short break, and then workshop block 3 begins at 11:30. I get that right? Good. During the break, a couple of things for you to do. Certainly take a look at the dinner with a local displays in the lobby of the upper school. Colleagues and friends would love to have you join them this evening as they share their best of Baltimore with you. Also, if you haven't yet, please be sure to stop by our exhibitors in the main hall just off the lobby. They've supported all of our work throughout this conference and would appreciate having a chance to visit with you. I understand that our school store, the Brown Building across the street, is also available. Several of you have asked about being able to brand Boys Latin somewhere in the far corners of the world, and we'd be only too happy to have you have that chance. You can also visit the conference bookstore, which is located on the main level of the upper school. Copies of Joe Ehrman's books are available, and he'll be signing those following his remarks this afternoon. And lastly, lunch will again be available in our student commons across the way. In addition to the tables inside the commons, there's also additional seating next door in the Eigelhart Center, and of course, there's plenty outside. In particular, I saw several folks yesterday enjoying our outdoor classroom whose benches were built by our 5th graders as part of their camping trip. So if you have a chance, take a look. Folks, have a wonderful morning. Thanks for being with us.